Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Saturday discussions. During the two talks today, I hope to share some information that I've learned over the years, which I think is very valuable for each of us to live our lives in the best way possible. What I have to say is what I've learned from my own teachers. I don't profess to be an exponent of this wisdom and compassion, but at least by sharing my understanding of what the Lamas have taught us over the years, we may have some common group understanding together. So I think we can all benefit, I hope. To start with, we should set our mind in a clear motivation, clear purpose for participating in today's talks. And the main thing is that we lack knowledge of reality, we lack knowledge of ourselves and the outside world, we lack knowledge of our emotional states that are so important in establishing constructive relationships. So most definitely the Buddhism is a psychology which enables us to establish peace in our own minds and to at least be a positive partner in all the different relationships we have with others, not only with people but with animals, birds, insects, the outside, even the environment that we experience is affected by our emotional state as we are affected by the environment. So there's a lot to be learned, and we need to begin with the clear idea of trying to gain insight into what we're going to talk about. Not just for our own benefit, but in order to benefit all others. There are some concepts which may be not so clear, but at least with an introduction, the seeds will be planted to gain future understanding of the profound meaning of these teachings. So I suggest as a label for these talks something about self-consciousness. And self-consciousness is simply awareness of our own self, the person we are, the person who is experiencing things, the person who is relating to others. And there are clearly our view of our own self, or our self-image, is vital in everything that we do. The problems with self-consciousness is when we fall into self-importance or self-cherishing, which is seeing ourselves, our own happiness, our own freedom from suffering, as more important than the needs of others. The advantages of self-consciousness is when we know how we exist in reality, that will free us from self-importance, from self-indulgence, and that will raise our confidence, our self-confidence in engaging in whatever we're doing in life in a constructive, a creative way, in a way which embraces the needs of others, sees the needs of others as very important, at least as important as our own, and at best, more important than our own needs. And that's universal compassion. So, from the very beginning of our life, when we're still in our mother's womb, self-awareness manifested when the embryo woke up as a fetus at about 26 weeks of gestation. And at that period, there was immediately, a clear sense of self. Where am I? What am I doing? There were sensations in the womb, physical sensations, sound, and a sense of I experiencing the environment of the womb. It's taught in the Buddhist texts that the fetus at that time of first waking up at about 26 weeks of gestation is very clear awareness of past lives, or at least the experience in past life which brought about the present situation. There's sort of an intuitive cognition of the passage of mind from life to life. And that can remain quite clear in a fetus's mind during further growth in the womb. And then there are emotions associated with that feeling. Maybe elation, maybe, I think in the medical text, a sense of melancholy. Here we go again. Then, when the baby's born, the being born itself is extremely painful for the baby, frightening, sense of suffocation, emerging from the warmth of the womb into the cold air, the bright light hurting the eyes. That's why babies screw up their eyes when they're born. And physical pain from the touch of the softest cloth. So they cry. If they don't cry, we smack them on the bottom to make them cry. Not long after, in most cases, the fear of the newborn baby is lessened by the sound of the mother's voice. Already, the baby is very familiar with the sound of mother's voice. Everything else is so strange, being born into this environment. But mother's voice is something that they know full well. This is something that they can relate to. And just the sound of her voice and the touch of her warm body is incredibly soothing for those fears and anxiety having been born. It's said that even that awareness of past lives can remain. It's different for each individual, but it can remain for months, years even. Of course, baby can't talk about it because the baby's nervous system has yet to develop the capacity for speech. But the awareness is there. And there are reported cases where children do begin to talk, and they do talk about awareness of past lives. But that's not the topic of discussion for this weekend. Rebirth and so on. we're discussing this line. So, with the neonate, then the dependence on the mother goes very strong. The baby depends upon her for food, for nourishment, from her milk, and the mental nourishment of love from her heart. Very quickly, independence upon this object of comfort and pleasure becomes incorporated into the baby's self-image. Mother becomes my mummy. And with that sense, the meaning of my, it means that the self-image is now beginning to incorporate external objects. My mummy, my daddy, and as it grows older, my toys. The whole environment progressively, with the label of mine, becomes an extension of the self-image, the self-consciousness. And unfortunately, within the self-image, from the first moment we were born, or we woke up in the mother's womb, the way in which one exists as an individual, the way in which this thought of I appears is mistaken. There is the appearance of a solid, concrete, real, true me here, somewhere inside the body. A real, true me. And with that appearance, we grasp at that appearance to be correct. We have no reason not to. And so, with the gradual development of the mind in the womb and after being born and as a toddler and so on, there is a differentiation between me and not me. And me is clearly the most important person in the world. Every little child certainly considers itself the center of the universe. And mother, father, brothers are objects to please me, for my pleasure. And the family are very willing to comply with our demands. If they don't, we soon let them know about it. With screaming, with anger. So you see, there's already in the mind, not newly, but we have seeds of attachment and anger, these disturbing emotions, already in the mind from past lives. So they automatically ripen with mine and not mine, and what I want and what I don't want. And so these emotional disturbances are strongly manifest at an incredibly young age. We don't have to teach attachment or aversion and anger to little babies. They all will manifest these disturbing emotions. As Sigmund Freud said, every child is born with what he calls the pleasure principle, desire for pleasure and aversion to not, or to displeasure or not getting what one wants. And the first struggle that we all face is the conflict between this pleasure principle, these innate desires and aversions, and the reality principle that the world does not provide us always with what we want and it does not protect us from what we don't want. So the developing self-consciousness, or ego of the young child has to start rationalizing the inner urges, the strivings for pleasure and not to have pain, to balance the pleasure principle with the reality principle. And so, consciously or even unconsciously, the child modifies the way it relates with the outside environment in a very manipulative way to get what it wants and to avoid what it doesn't want. So that's self-consciousness in terms of self-centeredness or self-cherishing has a huge impact upon our life experience, and whether we can organize the world to fit our way or not is quite variable in so many lives. When we use the term ego, that includes the self-image, the self-consciousness, and the way we see ourselves. But more than that, it includes our whole developing worldview, of what's going on out there. And we're constantly asking, why? As little children, why is this? Why is that? And very often, the question why can stump our parents, stump those who can't give an acceptable explanation of why this is happening, why we're doing that. But we're asking. So we get mixed messages, but we're building up our view of the me and my environment, not me. And so we call this the worldview. Later on, we incorporate whatever ethical standards our parents obey. Like a sponge, our mind absorbs the attitudes of our parents, and then later peers like friends at school and teachers and so on. We learn religious doctrines of ethical conduct, or we obey the society's laws of how to conduct oneself. But underneath, there's always this inner demand to get the best out of everything. If we know if we don't obey the laws, we'll get in trouble. So we don't want to get into trouble. But there's still strong self-centeredness in our attitude to life. There's also, because of what we absorb from our parental examples, and also from the ripening of seeds of positive emotions from past lives, of generosity, of love, of compassion, and patience, and so on. There's also the opportunity for every human to innately, I say intuitively, I don't mean out of nowhere, but from these seeds, to behave in constructive ways, in benevolent ways. And so, but whether there's positive feedback or not from society is so variable. So we grow up with quite mixed attitudes and approaches to life. The positive seeds can be reinforced by our environment, or they can be pushed down, squashed, put away. So it's the maturing of the mind in terms of one's worldview and one's behaviour. The worldview is that through which we act within society and within our family and all relationships. is so variable, so many individuals. At different times we get the right input or the wrong input, and that's why we're such a mixed bunch. But according to Buddhism, the primary cause for being born as a human being is incredibly positive. And in essence, it is living in accordance with the pure ethics of non-harmfulness towards others and a benevolent attitude towards others. These are the causes in past lives which bring about rebirth as a human. So every human being comes from a remarkably positive background, psychological background, compared to being reborn as an animal or, in a less conducive situation where one can practice those positive emotions and more conducive to enhancing aversion, aggression, self-centeredness in any of the animal rebirths. Now, it's not putting down animals as being inferior, because we're all equal in terms of having the same mental potentials, mental capacities. But we know that even humans, according to the social conditions, some children can just be steered into an incredibly destructive, aggressive, self-destructive lifestyle. Others can be steered into a positive, outgoing, benevolent lifestyle for others. And there can be crossover as we grow older from one side to the other. Now, it is not discriminating as bad or inferior those who cannot keep life together and maintain a positive attitude. There's a whole social conditions which are changeable, always changeable and changing. But within every mind, no matter where one exists in the social standing, there's equality, equal potential. And so we need to be always aware of that. And as we gain control over our own self-centered, self-cherishing attitudes, and we mature into consideration of others and self-confidence and self-esteem based upon a genuine positive attitude in our mind, then we become capable of helping others at whatever station they're in, helping them to get their own worldview into focus and to gain what they can out of life, which is so full of promise for every being. Even the animals have great promise. They also have the seeds for every positive emotion and every negative emotion, as does every human being. So that's sort of why I've chosen this topic of self-consciousness to discuss the positive aspects and the negative aspects of self-consciousness during this weekend. Now, in the notes that I've prepared for you, they're really a list of points to think about and consider. During the talks, you're most welcome at any time to put your hand up, ask questions. This isn't like a lecture, but I much prefer an interactive discussion on these topics as we go through them. So I've begun by talking about the two problematic, the two basic problems in our mind: self-grasping ignorance and self-cherishing ignorance. And and from the Buddhist point of view, these two attitudes, conceptions or ideas, are at the root of every unhappy, suffering experience in life. So in Buddhism, as I've mentioned already, the minds of all beings, humans, animals, wherever one's born, have the psychological seeds or potentials for all-embracing wisdom. This is the wisdom seeing all of reality and universal compassion. And the goal of Buddhist practice is to attain wisdom and universal compassion united in one state of mind. Now, wisdom is a mental attitude which sees reality, which knows reality. Compassion is an attitude which is aware of the suffering of others and has the wish to ease the burden of suffering of others. So the objects of those two mental states of wisdom and compassion are different. And ordinarily, our mind can only focus clearly on one thing at a time. So it's impossible for ordinary people to be able to focus upon reality with wisdom and the suffering of others, not just with compassion, but with the altruistic intention to ease their suffering. Right? They're different objects, they're different states of mind. So for us, we can alternate between wisdom and compassion, but we can't have them in the one state of mind. But the goal of Buddha's path, the state of mind of a Buddha, has a unification of wisdom and compassion. In one moment, one mental attitude, unceasingly, there is a combination of awareness of a reality, and particularly we're referring to the reality of mundane existence under the control of ignorance, awareness of that, awareness of the suffering, and also as bright and as manifest as it could be, the altruistic attitude to ease the suffering of others. So you might think, oh, what a drag. Who wants to become a Buddha where you're aware of the suffering of all beings? And, it's a bit like watching the evening news all the time. It's just bad, bad, bad. But the wisdom gives the bliss. We're watching all the bad things on the news and we think, what the hell can we do about it? This evolving state with Russia and Europe and America and the Ukraine. And incredible how people can just approach war. And the weapons, the billions of dollars of weapons and planes and ships coming together. Just like being in Beijing and watching the Olympics, there's so much nationalism. I mean, there's pretty heavy conflict even in the Olympic Games, but not to mention saber rattling. And there's more than saber rattling. Anyway, it can be depressing. We can see our leaders. I won't mention the names. What are these guys doing? Guiding the country? Or these women or guys, whoever they are, they're hopeless. But when we have wisdom, then the mind can remain calm. A little child is crying and distressed. Oh, this happened. And comes crying to mummy. Mummy has great love for her child and doesn't want the child to cry, but she's not distressed. She has soothing words. Look, just look at it this way. It's not like you thinking it is. And just with a few words, mummy can relieve the distress in the child's mind by pointing out a different way of looking at the situation. So, compassion, yes, is sad. I mean, often, you see, when the Dalai Lama is teaching about the suffering of the world, genuine tears come. There is of course, there is a degree of distress when we're aware of the depth of suffering of others. But there is not the, what can be done? There's not the hopelessness that ordinarily comes with our compassion when there's wisdom. Wisdom, it can see the solution. And so there isn't the inner distress. There is concern, of course, for the welfare of others, but wisdom gives that not only calm mind, but wisdom of conventional ultimate reality makes the mind incredibly blissful. There is no distress, no agitation. And so those two states of mind come together in a Buddhist. That's the goal of Buddhahood. To see reality and to have the attitude, no matter how long it takes. There are many situations in society which are, the karmic ball has begun to roll, and not even a Buddha can prevent that. But a Buddha is fully aware of how the outcome will be, and eventually the turmoil will subside, and there will be an opportunity to break free from the incredible destructive forces that happen so frequently in human society, just human society alone. Okay, so that's the first paragraph. In more detail, wisdom is clear awareness of the conventional and ultimate reality of all things. Now, that clear awareness of conventional and ultimate reality, so clear is important. I'll explain what clear means. Conventional reality is the cause and effect sequence of events in our life, in the lives of others, in society, in the world. Buddhism uses the term karma, which the Sanskrit word, which simply means cause and effect, that nothing happens without a cause. And therefore, if you know the cause, in terms of a negative result, then you can deal with if you deal with the cause and you eliminate the cause, the negative result cannot happen. In terms of positive experiences in the world, if you know the cause of positive experience, by enhancing those causes and beginning to create those causes, things can only get better. That's conventional reality. I think, when I was coming to terms with Buddhism, before having received extensive instruction on the teachings, but not becoming a Buddhist, I was fully aware of the deficiencies of our society. I'm talking about Western society, that was what I was familiar with. And I was thinking about this Buddhist cause and effect, and thinking a lot. Travelled overland from India to England, where I was working in hospitals around London, all the time thinking about the problems in society, not just medical problems, but the social problems. And having grown up in a political, not politically minor, but politics were supposed to be the solution to social woes. And I could see that there was no solution. I was living with a lady, and she and all of her friends were involved in extreme left-wing politics. And at parties and pubs and so on, all these left-wing debates and discussions. And all I could see, I've already got the Buddhist view in my mind, but not yet Buddhist. I could see this hatred. Not only hatred of the capitalists, but hatred of each other. The Maoists hated the Trotskyists hated the Leninists, and real anger and aggression. And I said at meetings, I stood up, I said, look, you have no agreement amongst yourselves. You hate each other. You certainly hate the capitalists. And you think your revolution is going to change when it comes from your own attitudes, your own destructive attitudes, even towards each other? I said, the capitalists out there in London, they're not going to listen to you. They're going to oppose you. If you want your revolution to succeed, you've got to kill them. And I said, who's going to kill them? You? Or your followers? I'm talking to the leaders. They fobbed it off. Called me, a religious idiot. I didn't mention Buddhism. I had no religion whatsoever. To me, that was an insult. But I knew I was talking sense, and they weren't. Now, later, months later, back in India, I accepted Buddhism. So conventional reality is important, the cause and effect of what's going on. We've got to know. No point. Well, no. If we have wisdom, understanding cause and effect, we won't be saddened, we won't be distressed by the evening news, all the terrible things happening. We'll be able to see what's going on. Our mind can remain calm. Ultimate reality is the ultimate way things exist. And all things exist, especially our own self, our own person. How do I exist as an individual? When we ultimately analyze what is a person, in particular, what is the person that I think I am I correct in my self-image? What is it that makes my mind so angry when I don't get what I want, so attached when I experience pleasure and nice things, and cling? What makes me jealous? What makes me proud? All of these disturbing attitudes. So, ultimate reality gives the answer to those questions. All right, so to develop this wisdom, clear awareness of conventional and ultimate reality, then we begin with correct knowledge. Right? Knowledge, intellectual knowledge that we get from listening to others or from reading information. So correct knowledge is the beginning of developing of wisdom. But knowledge of what we've read and heard is very superficial. We have to go deeper through logical analysis and reasoning to affirm whether that knowledge is valid or not. Because there's such things as, it's not an oxymoron to talk about incorrect knowledge. A lot of us have incorrect knowledge. I don't want to upset anybody, but anti-vaxxers are a little bit incorrect knowledge. So much rubbish people gain from the internet. And all right, A lot of the conspiracy stuff is incorrect knowledge. But the people who hold that, they believe it's true. We've got to have logical reasoning to assess whether it's true or not. And it's not enough to say, that's rubbish. Forget it. That's not logical reasoning. So whatever we learn, we must analyse very open-mindedly to see whether it stands up to fact, to reason or not to reason. And if it is correct, and if we have reasoning powers and logical powers, we can ascertain that this is indeed valid, that is not valid. So this understanding now is the development of the knowledge that we receive from, well, the internet these days, mostly, books, the word of others. So we must check up. When Lama Thubten Gyatso and Lama Zopa Rinpoche first began teaching Westerners in the 70s, mostly Kathmandu, Nepal, their talks were peppered constantly. Check up. You check up in your own mind. Check up to see whether this is true or not. What they were teaching. Check up. It was such a common phrase. So that, to check up, we need logical powers. We need to be trained in logic. But you see, it's essential that we subject what we understand to be true to logical reasoning to see whether it's really valid or not. And having applied logical reasoning and ascertained that it's valid, then we have understanding. So this is the next level of wisdom. Began with knowledge, then understanding. And that understanding is developed in our own mind. You can't really get understanding from books. You can only get knowledge from books. You have to check up and get understanding. In school examinations, you can be like a parrot, and you can, just through knowledge, you can write down all the answers. But a good examiner is looking for understanding, not just the correct answer. I remember having been subjected to the various ways of exams in high school. I once taught at Tara Institute in Melbourne a subject called LORIM, Mind and Awareness. And the people who attended that course had to do an exam. And so I set an exam along the way I learnt at school of multiple choice answers, A, B, C, D, which is correct, or things like that. And Geshe Doga was quite wrathful. This isn't checking. This isn't an examination. This isn't getting to find out whether they understand or not. It's just examining their knowledge. Not enough. You have to examine their understanding. Okay. Then, having generated valid understanding, then we proceed to develop clear wisdom. And clear wisdom is attained through the power of single-pointed concentration upon our understanding. So we penetrate, it's essential to meditate upon our understanding and gain total single-pointed clarity of mind, free from all of the other thoughts and ideas and emotions constantly popping up, and to focus upon the object of our understanding. And if we succeed, there's a breakthrough and this is like clear. Clear means free from all the conceptual ideas, all the beliefs, and just focusing upon reality. I think this is the eureka moment, like Archimedes sat in the bath. Eureka, he understood Archimedes' principle. And there's so many examples within science where individuals are really thinking deeply about a particular subject or, their topic of research. And it's when they stop the reading and stop the thinking, the conceptual activity, and do something like have a bath, go for a walk in the park, and let it out of the air or from somewhere, the answer is there. That's only a flash, but I think it's an example of meditative awareness. So meditative, clear wisdom is much more stable because it doesn't rely upon a chance cessation of distracting thoughts. We have the power of single-pointed concentration, and it becomes very clear. So, that's the third step, going from knowledge to understanding to clear wisdom. Now, we focus that wisdom upon what am I? How do I exist? That is the actual wisdom which will recognize the falsity in our self-image. Our self-image isn't entirely wrong, but the fundamental way we think we exist is wrong, and that is the root of all of our disturbing emotions, which then bring about suffering. So the only mental attitude which will destroy that is clear wisdom. Then the bliss automatically arises. Single point of concentration itself is said to be an incredibly blissful experience. But the relief, knowledge of the relief or potential relief of pain, or it's like you burn your finger and you stick it under cold water. There's immediate relief, not long term, because the burn's still there, but there's immediate relief. The wisdom, we all have this burning pain of self-consciousness grasping at a false self, at a real true me. There's always an underlying agitation in our mind, think, oh, is this going to hurt me and not hurt me? Oh, can I get that? That's lovely. I don't want that. That's bad. There's always this inner anxiety associated with focus on a real, true me who does not exist in the way we think we exist. Anyway, enough of that. Universal compassion. Universal compassion is the altruistic intention to guide all beings to happiness and freedom from suffering. So, at the moment, I want happiness and I don't want suffering. But if we use knowledge and analytical understanding, we can see that we're all in the same boat. Really, we look different, but inside our minds function in the same way. And there's no valid reason why my happiness is more important than his or her or its, an animal's, happiness. And why my freedom from suffering is more important than his or her or its freedom from suffering. Their mind behaves exactly as my mind does. And when I'm obsessed with self-importance, I either give suffering to others through anger, aggression, hostility. If I follow this football team and they're wearing the colours of that football team, they're my enemy. Well, that sort of thing. This is what's so horrible about the Olympic Games, is the nationalism. I find it so distasteful, because it's the seed of war and hatred. And they talk about the Olympics being friendly and bringing people together, but a lovely aim, and possible. I'm not saying it's impossible. I think the rings together indicate that concept of coming together and hopefully dissolving the differentiation through nationalism, but that's not the way it works. Australia is so much on the medal tally. Oh, great. And the obsession with, I won't go, you know what I mean. So altruistic compassion is based upon recognizing our equality. Equal rights is a big standard to bear in a demonstration, but do we really mean equal rights? Or do we hate those who discriminate against me? That question needs to be answered in our demonstrations. Equal rights is equal, universal equality. Equal right for happiness and freedom from suffering? Yes, why not? Equal need for happiness and freedom from suffering. There's where compassion comes in. That this person's suffering is as intolerable as is my suffering. And I will do anything to stop my suffering. But I will, only to a degree, or not at all, will I do anything to stop that person's suffering. When we have the wisdom, understanding reality, and we have the reasons for universal compassion, we can extinguish the self-grasping ignorance and the self-cherishing. Self-cherishing ignorance is considering my needs, my rights, as more important than others. Now, there are many opportunities in everyday life. If we ask ourselves, why am I saying this? Why am I doing this? Is it because I'm motivated through self-cherishing? My happiness, my freedom from suffering is more important than somebody else's. It's very pervasive. It's incredibly pervasive. And whereas wisdom can eliminate the self-grasping ignorance, grasping at the mistaken view of self, only altruistic compassion, universal compassion. Universal means for all living beings, not discriminating against any living being, no matter human, animal, insect, whatever type of rebirth sentient beings are experiencing, they are all embraced by this attitude of universal compassion. So that is the opponent to self-cherishing ignorance. Wisdom alone cannot extinguish self-cherishing ignorance. Universal compassion alone cannot extinguish self-grasping ignorance. And to develop, follow the path, developing wisdom and compassion, they rely upon each other. Eventually, instead of relying upon each other, They become one state of mind. Compassion and wisdom conjoined in one moment. That's the moment of Buddhahood, which we all have the potential to achieve. So how do we begin training our mind in wisdom and compassion? Through ethical conduct. Ethics means, from the Buddhist point of view, abiding in the pure morality of non-harmfulness and of benevolence towards others. So we adopt a code of ethics, of non-harmfulness, not in a gross way, not harming others through killing, stealing, sexual indulgence, harsh, abusive speech, lying, even idle gossip, slander, not harbouring malicious thoughts, not harbouring covetousness thoughts, I want. Not harbouring wrong views or incorrect knowledge. So much incorrect knowledge. I mean, even Trump talked about false facts. Spread. But he was probably the greatest spreader of false facts of all. But true, false facts are a problem. And incorrect knowledge is false fact. We've got to beware that they sneak into our worldview. We've got a lot of false facts in our worldviews. We may say, no. But we do. We have to be self-analytical. Why am I thinking this? Look, as long as we're human, as long as we get knowledge, I'm not discarding books, we cannot have wisdom without books, without knowledge. Check out the false facts that colour our attitude to the world and get rid of them. Use analytical reasoning. All right, so ethics is abiding in pure morality and non-harmfulness, is the foundation for cultivating wisdom and universal compassion. I've just put a bit in here which reflection of a discussion that's happening elsewhere. Humans may obey rules of ethical conduct in dependence upon the authority of a divine creator as revealed by special persons, Moses and so on, or in dependence upon social laws and customs, or even in dependence upon reason. So these are sort of three fundamental, causes for ethical conduct. Human history, however, shows that ethical conduct under religious rules, under laws and custom, and even by reason, can be quickly contaminated or abandoned. Ethical behaviour goes out the window due to self-grasping ignorance and self-cherishing ignorance. I, my country, my political views are more important than yours. Yours are wrong. We destroy. So, pure ethical conduct can only come from inside. It can't come from religion. It can't come from the law. Even reasoning without a solid understanding is not enough. To act purely in an ethical way, we've got to have wisdom. So it's something which grows. To get to that wisdom, we need to initially obey the 10 Commandments, to obey the laws on karma, to obey the law of the land. I mean, in a general way, the law of the land says don't kill, don't steal, don't harm others, and try and help others. Ethical conduct isn't just don't. It's do. Benevolent social activities. And we will admire, we recognize and we reward benevolent social activity. That's part of ethical conduct. That's the positive. Do this. When we do that, our mind will be much more at peace and able to gain the knowledge of reading, the understanding of logical analysis, and the wisdom of meditation. If our mind is too caught up in superficial activities, then we will never gain that wisdom. So, cultivation of wisdom depends upon ethical conduct, as does the cultivation of universal compassion. Intellectually we can say, oh yes, we all have equal rights. But, our words don't really fit our actions. We're too selfish, we're too caught up in self-centeredness and self-cherishing. But through ethical conduct, we feel, oh, I should help that person. No, too much. I want to watch this show on TV. I won't give them a call, ask how you're going. I won't go out in the cold and go to them and try and help those who are in trouble. So if we don't have the ethical conduct, at least initially recognizing the needs of others, we're going to stay in our own little shell, and we will never grow into altruistic attitude of love and compassion for all beings. So, but if we have established rules of morality from our own side, then we'll say, oh look, don't be lazy. You just want to relax yourself. This person is in trouble. Give them a call. Go and see them. Help them out. There's starving people out there. Help, give food, material charity, the charity of love, which in many ways, the charity of love is far more beneficial than the charity of food. But still, if people are starving, they can't respond to the charity of love. So, by adopting personal codes which we're constantly improving, we're not going to change overnight into saints or bodhisattvas. But if that's our goal, then all of these situations can be transformed from a negative self-cherishing attitude to a positive cherishing others attitude. So based upon our rules of ethical conduct. So that's the foundation. If we don't have these positive rules of ethical behavior, we won't get wisdom, we won't get universal compassion. The second force which leads to be able to cultivate wisdom and compassion is faith. Now, as I said, innate self-grasping ignorance and self-cherishing ignorance do not lie down without a fight. They're the real enemy in our own mind, which we have to overcome. But they're very well fortified in our own mind. To maintain pure ethical conduct, right? We establish rules of ethical behavior, but we can water them down. To keep them pure, we need faith that cultivating wisdom and cultivating universal compassion is a valid path in life, is the most important path in life to adopt. And so, belief that wholesome behavior is the true cause of happiness, and ignorant, unwholesome behavior is the true cause of unhappiness, that gives rise to the mental aspiration to cultivate positive or constructive behavior and abandon destructive behavior. So our mind is the field of activity in following the path of wisdom and compassion. And the self-grasping and self-cherishing which won't lie down, then we need means to put them down. And faith refers to conviction in the cause and effect that I mentioned before. Disturbing emotions bring unhappiness. Positive emotions bring peace and happiness. So when we initiate that training of our mind, we get positive feedback immediately. People start recognizing and smiling and thanking. I remember in the early days, I can't remember, I think it was directed to me, but people who start learning about Buddhism and trying to put it into practice, and people have told, their friends have said, "You're so calm these days. What are you taking?" They're not taking anything. They're changing the mental attitude. And so others recognize it, and there's positive feedback. So this increases our faith and our determination to pursue ethical conduct, even in the face of social derision and hostility. Now, when I first came back from Nepal, after 4 years as a monk and wearing robes in the streets of Melbourne, I had beer cans thrown at me. I was spat at, insulted, frowned at, scowled at, called a Hare Krishna. I think the Hare Krishnas were a little bit masochistic, standing on the street corner and ringing bells and trying to confront people. Anyway, but they're very nice people. They're practicing their ethical conduct. So, the faith, what I'm talking about, in general, certainly in my background, faith was a dirty word. But the meaning of faith is important. Faith includes the attitudes of conviction that non-harmfulness is a proper way of living. It includes an admiring those who do live in a benevolent way towards others. And aspiration. Faith also has the aspiration to be like that. Self-confidence arising from our resultant benevolent lifestyle and the positive feedback then gives us the energy and the enthusiasm to seek knowledge at its deepest level, right? We need energy to take book-learned knowledge into analytical reasoning knowledge into wisdom. It takes a lot of effort to meditate, to gain single point of concentration. I know, I tried for 3 years on Kangaroo Island. I got to step 1 of 9 steps. But it's possible. We should never think it's impossible. That's a type of laziness which will come. So the definition of faith in Buddhist teachings is belief in something that is correct at both the conventional and ultimate levels. We don't know it's correct, it's still belief. But things are either correct or incorrect. There's no shades of grey. And we can only know it's correct when we develop the wisdom of analysis or the wisdom of meditation. Belief in something that is not correct is not faith. It's a mistaken view. Belief in false facts isn't faith. I mean, faith is a type of belief, but it's defined in Buddhism as belief in something which is valid. Now, of course, we don't know it's valid. That's why we need faith. We believe that, the stories of the great saints, of the great bodhisattvas, are so inspiring that we can generate belief that they live in a valid way. And I can achieve that. I must achieve that. I'm a human being. This is the best life state to achieve that. No other life state can achieve that development into wisdom and compassion. So there's 3 levels of faith. There's the faith of admiration or admiring faith. And that's generated through knowledge, knowledge of listening to and reading correct information, such as the presentation of karmic cause and effect. Admiring those of excellent example overcomes jealousy and endows us with courage and determination to achieve our goal. But this simple faith, this simple admiring faith, because it's not supported by logical reasoning, it can be lost. Somebody can talk us out of it if we don't have the understanding of reality. So the next level of faith is based upon the initial admiring, is faith of conviction. And this is acquired through logical analysis and meditation. And having done that, that faith can never be lost because it is growing into the knowledge of understanding. And the more we gain understanding, the stronger becomes our faith of conviction. So in this way, faith and conviction and knowledge play mutually supportive roles until eventually faith is no longer needed, because one's knowledge becomes the wisdom of meditation that directly perceives reality. So we've achieved, the faith has led us to that goal, and we can't have that goal without an initial faith that this is valid. We go to a university, we sign up for a particular course, we don't know what it means to be a lawyer or a doctor or a teacher or an engineer, whatever, but we have faith that the university will provide us with the education where we can become a lawyer, a doctor or engineer or whatever. First person to call me a doctor was Robert Menzies. He handed me my diploma at Melbourne University. "Congratulations, doctor." And shook my hand. Of course, Robert Menzies was my father's worst enemy. And my father was in the audience. So, I shook his hand. Disdainfully.
Yeah, sorry, I think there's a question.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, I think this is the confusing part. Like, I've met a few people over the years, and they might have very strong convictions, for example, extreme right wing or extreme in their political views, and they're totally convinced that they have understanding and wisdom from gaining insight, both through books and their own knowledge. I would call them misguided or whatever. I don't agree with those views myself, but they're totally convinced that they're right. So isn't that the problem? They might be looking at it and they might be in the echo chamber. They're getting reinforcement for their views from their own factions or whatever. But how do you reconcile it where everyone believes they're right, no matter what they're doing, and that they have the right insight,
right,
and we don't? And we're being patronising, saying they're wrong. And how do you come to this sort of how do you reconcile those different views, I guess?
So how do we reconcile the fact that people who hold strong political views and so on, religious views, are convinced that they are right? Because we're talking about wisdom and compassion. And we're talking about whether things do exist inherently from their own side or not, and whether or not we are all equal in simply wanting happiness and wanting freedom from suffering, and whether we have equal right to happiness and freedom from suffering. That is a topic under consideration of faith and the development of knowledge and wisdom. So, when we think about, just intellectually, the knowledge of reading, we think about non-inherent existence. Like, the Lamas have said that just hearing the word non-inherent, not even in Sanskrit, shunyata, bodhicitta, just hearing those words shakes the very foundation of samsara, the agitated mind born from ignorance of every living being. So when we think about those topics, the reality comes clear. The reality of suffering. Yeah. Well, example. I grew up with belief that true happiness in life will be to have a job, a wife, children, family. Right? There's the source of happiness. And a lot of life experiences. And then when I met Buddhism and decided to become a monk, Lama Yeshe said, ask your parents' permission. And so my father at that time was, I think it was 2 years after my mother's early death, 52. And he was living alone in intense misery. And I said, Lama Yeshe wants your permission for me to become a monk. Well, ask me, you always do what you want to do anyway. But it was clear, his expression was a wife and children. I had a good job, so that was okay, which I loved, but I didn't have wife and children. But that was the source of happiness. That was his view, but his life, which had been so dependent upon my mother and deprived, he was in such depression, such grief, so lost. And that's the reality. Whatever, every meeting is a cause of a separation. And that separation can come at any time. A tragic story in the news this morning of such a common occurrence. The car's being backed down the drive of the family house and runs over the baby and kills it. This little potential life with so much potential for happiness extinguished. So anyway, so the point is that wisdom and compassion as the objects of our contemplation, there is instant feedback. You just have to watch a spider catch a fly in a web and eat the fly alive. Incredible compassion. Put your mind into that fly's body. Your mind into the parents of the child who was accidentally killed. Put your mind into the child's body. It is so obvious, it's glaring in the face, the reality of suffering and the cause of suffering. So I said to my father, look, I don't know whether I can live without a wife and children who my father and I, believed were the cause of peace and happiness. I didn't say, look at you. Only it was just so obvious that. And anyway, when you look back, his relationship with my mother wasn't too peaceful. Rarely peaceful. So much verbal, violent argument. So much miscommunication. No need to go into my family history, but I think you know what I mean. Even when as a young man and we were first meeting young ladies and getting to know each other, I remember one of my friends saying, sex isn't all that it's cracked up to be. It's associated. It's not what you believe it to be and what you dream it to be. There's good aspects, but there are problems associated. So is that the answer? The difference is that when you have addicted to your political beliefs, look what's happening. Are you able to really benefit society? And that's what turned me against the communists in London.
No, that's good. Thanks. Can I just make a little comment? It's about an earlier thing. You're talking about the Olympics. I noticed in the last, the big Olympics and then the current ones, a lot of those new sports dominated by very young people. I noticed they have a real difference in attitude. With they're all talking about how they're great friends and they've stepped aside from their country politics.
Yeah.
They're very much working together as comrades, despite the different nationalities and everything. But I think that's very refreshing. And I think people are much more ahead of their political genres or their nationalities. I think there's a lot of.
So you're saying that there is some coming to. I agree. There's positivity and a positive concept behind the Olympic Games. But what about if you're a woman? You can't play beach volleyball if you don't wear a skimpy bikini.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
What's that got to do with sport? Yeah. Contamination. So look, we're at convictional faith. Convictional faith is much stronger than admiring faith because it's dependent upon logical analysis, reasoning, and meditation as well. And we're talking about wisdom and compassion. So if wisdom is correct, as presented, conventional reality of cause and effect, and ultimate reality of emptiness of inherent existence, the more you question it, and I was going to say that just hearing the words shunyata and bodhicitta is beneficial. Once I was at our centre in Sydney, and Lama Zopa Rinpoche was visiting, and he said, go to Taronga Park Zoo and teach Dhamma to the animals. Let them hear the words shunyata and bodhicitta, and that will shake the foundation of their ignorance. Just the word itself of wisdom and the word itself of universal compassion, they nurture the seeds of wisdom and compassion that already exist in our minds. They don't have to be planted. They exist in the minds of animals, not to mention humans. And so when we cultivate the wisdoms of knowledge, understanding, and clear wisdom, we are nurturing the seedlings of wisdom and compassion already in our minds. And if they are correct, the external world, the response from the external world, and just the external world itself, will enhance that wisdom and compassion. That's my point. And this is where we check up. This is why Lama said, check up, check up, check up. Check up, not just on your own experience, but check up in what you read on the news and see on the television. You know, even the soap operas can be a source of wisdom. So you can rationalize your favorite soap if you want to watch it. The third level of faith, this type of faith, based upon the other two, is aspiring faith. So this is the aspiration. When we become convinced that the wholesome goals, such as altruism and wisdom, are attainable, then we generate the aspiration to attain them. And that aspiration is so important because it becomes the foundation of energy behind the path, and it overcomes our biggest obstacle to the growth of wisdom and compassion, laziness. We'll talk about that. So, we're on to page 2. Long way to go. But any other questions that you may have thought of? Yeah.
I don't know, it's over time.
Yeah, it's nearly time, but we can go over time. The Lamas always do.
So I had 2 quick questions. So first one was,
Take that, Marcin, because I'm going deaf too.
so I had 2 questions
Yeah.
regarding the different kinds of faith. So
Yeah.
one was, you talked about at the beginning about checking up, how that's very important, what we're learning.
Yeah.
And then at the same time, like admiring faith is also important to kind of encourage us and keep us on the path, to invigorate us, keep going and wanting to learn. So how do you have a balance between the two, between having this sort of, because I feel like if you have too much admiring faith, it could lead towards fundamentalism maybe, and then at the same time if you have too much checking up as well, it could lead to
Too much.
if you have too much checking up, it could lead to like unnecessarily doubting without being kind of doubting in a positive way. Like, how do you kind of have a balance between the two?
How do you balance between the types of faith?
Like a good proportion of both, like both admiring faith and checking up like the convictional faith.
Yeah.
And then my second question, so here we kind of explain the different types of faith, right? Admiring faith, convictional faith, and aspiring faith. But how do we actually cultivate these and develop these in our minds?
All right, so the first is, how do you balance the 3 types of faith,
Yeah, especially the first and the second one,
particularly aspiring
and the convictional.
and conviction, and then how do you train in faith?
How do you cultivate these?
How do you cultivate faith? Well, I think this is why admiring faith comes first, because you are exposed to the teachings, you meet the teachings, and you meet people such as the Lamas who put the teachings into practice. So your critical mind, immediately, Buddha said himself, he said, don't take what I say on the basis of me being a famous person or whatever. He says, you must doubt what I say and go home and check up in your own experience whether it's valid or not. And he said, if you cannot see it as valid, then just put it aside. But if you see validity, then take it, put it into practice. So initially, there's the teachings themselves, and then there's the exponent of the teachings. Unfortunately, you're exposed to me, who is not an exponent or a practitioner of these teachings. That's your bad luck. I was exposed to Lama Yeshe and Lama Zopa Rinpoche, and I certainly asked questions. I mean, long story, but after meeting the Lamas, 1 month course in Nepal, and then going to England, back to Australia, and becoming a Buddhist in the way. And then meeting Lama Yeshe the next time he was being driven up by a good friend of mine to Melbourne University, the lecture theatre. What do they call it?
Wilson Hall. Wilson Hall.
No, not Wilson Hall. The theatre near the dining room. Anyway, he was going to give a talk at Melbourne University, and I went to open the door of the car, and had a big beard, and Lama Yeshe stuck his hand out through the window, grabbed my beard and pulled my face down towards his, and he said, "I remember you. You're the one who asked all those questions at Kopan." I'd become a Buddhist then. Anyway, ask questions. We must doubt. We must ask questions before we can get faith. Really question the teachings and the teachers. Then, in developing the 3 levels of faith, well, I can't see that anyone will override the other. I mean, they are interdependent, these levels of faith, and the more admiration, then that gives us more energy for conviction, and that gives us more energy for really aspiring to achieve those goals. You know, thinking I can do it is a huge step, overcoming our innate lethargy, our innate laziness, our innate reluctance, and our innate desire to pursue happiness in a mundane manner. Anyway, does that answer it? All right. Yeah, so think about it, check up over lunch, and we meet again, what, at 1:30? 1:30? All right. Good. So thank you.